Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Arianna Blackwood arrived with a small suitcase and hesitant steps at the rusted black gate that read, St. Elora Academy. The sky hung low with a dull gray hue, and a thick fog clung to the landscape like a cold blanket that never lifted. The school stood like a forgotten castle, untouched by time or change. Surrounding it were nothing but woods, tall trees whispering secrets to one another as the wind passed through. Arianna was a quiet girl, pale-skinned with deep eyes that seemed to carry years of sleepless nights. She wasn't particularly special, neither stunningly beautiful nor academically gifted. She simply wanted peace. But peace had always been a stranger to her. She hadn't chosen St. Elora, it had chosen her. At her previous school, Arianna had been relentlessly bullied, excluded for reasons she never fully understood, and hurt both physically and emotionally. The teachers looked the other way, and her parents advised patience. So when an unexpected scholarship came from an academy she had never heard of, she didn't question it. She took it as an escape. St. Elora had called her, and she answered. As she stepped into the dormitory, her feet froze. A student stood by the second-floor window, staring down at her with a blank expression. The gaze held no curiosity, no welcome, just a silent acknowledgement, as though they had been waiting for her. Room 303 was located at the far end of the third floor, down a hallway few dared to walk. The stairs creaked with every step, groaning like something old that resented being disturbed. The corridor lights were dim, casting weak glows that barely cut through the shadows. The moment Arianna reached the door, she sensed something off. The air was colder than the rest of the building. When she pushed the door open, its hinges let out a long, strained screech, like a warning. Inside, the furnishings were basic, a metal bed, a wooden desk, a wardrobe. But the upper corner of the far wall was darkened and damp, unlike the rest. Later that day, one of the girls in the dorm gave her a strange look when she found out Arianna had been assigned to room 303. The girl said nothing, just turned and walked away quickly, as if afraid of being caught in something she didn't want to explain. There were no official warnings, no notices from teachers or wardens, but whispers traveled fast. From the cafeteria to the library, rumors echoed. Room 303 had been vacant not due to lack of students, but because the room itself chose who was allowed to stay. The first few days at St. Elora were like déjà vu. Students rarely acknowledged Arianna. Some brushed past her intentionally, bumping her shoulder or knocking her books. But what unsettled her most weren't the subtle hostilities, it was the whispers. When she walked past the empty history room, a soft, childlike whisper echoed too closely behind her ear, though no one was there. During late-night study hours, she felt watched, as if someone or something observed her from the vents. She tried convincing herself it was exhaustion or lingering trauma from her old school. But the whispers were growing familiar. The cadence, the breathiness, they matched the voice she had begun to hear in her dreams since the first week. Even the corridor leading to room 303 seemed to amplify her footsteps. When she stopped walking, an extra step or two would echo behind her, always just a second too late, as if someone was following at a careful distance. No one openly confronted her, yet the isolation, the watching, and the tension clung to her like a second skin. Her escape had turned into a cycle repeating itself, but this time, something darker loomed beneath the surface. On her fourth night at St. Elora, Arianna woke up gasping. In her dream, she had wandered through the school's fog-covered courtyard, drawn by a faint sound of sobbing. The fog moved with a will of its own, pushing her forward, deeper into its heart. Through the mist, a silhouette appeared, a girl in an old, white gown, standing between two towering trees. Her head tilted slightly, as if curious. The girl called to Arianna without words, her mouth unmoving. But as Arianna stepped closer, she realized the girl's face was wrong. There were no eyes. No lips. Just pale skin stretched over bone, gently pulsing as if breathing. Arianna jolted awake. Her throat burned, and her body trembled. Instinctively, she grabbed her neck, and froze. Just under her jaw were marks. Faint, but distinct, 5 reddish-purple spots, like the fingers of a small hand had grasped her while she slept. She ran to the mirror and saw them clearly. Not scratches. Not bruises from pressure against a pillow. They were too specific, too human. Like a warning from something that had found her in her dreams, and reached through. Unable to sleep the following night, Arianna was overtaken by an unexplained restlessness. Something about her room called to her. As she sat on her bed, she noticed a loose plank beneath the mattress. The wooden floor seemed to bulge slightly, as if something lay hidden beneath. She pulled out a small pocket knife and carefully pried the board loose. Beneath it was a cloth-wrapped object, stained a yellow-brown from time and dampness. She unwrapped it, revealing an old, crumbling diary. The first page read, Margaret Elms, 1987. The handwriting was elegant, though later pages grew frantic. Margaret had once been a student here. Her early entries were filled with notes about being bullied, subtle cruelties that escalated to something far worse. The pain in her words was raw, almost suffocating. But then, the entries changed. Margaret began sketching strange patterns and faceless figures. She described hearing voices from the walls, of shadows moving without light. The final pages hinted that she had begun speaking to something that answered back. A presence. A voice. A protector, perhaps. In her last legible entry, Margaret wrote that she no longer feared the torment, because the walls had begun to whisper back, and they were angry. One foggy morning, Arianna wandered the eastern wing of the school, an area students rarely spoke about. The windows there were boarded, and the air smelled of mildew and rust. She stumbled upon a door, tarnished brass numbers barely visible, room 12C. The handle was stiff, but the door creaked open. Inside, dust blanketed every surface. Old desks sat in crooked rows, and the blackboard bore faint writing beneath layers of chalk residue. She stepped inside, feeling as though she was intruding on a moment frozen in time. On the teacher's desk lay a broken nameplate, Miss Elms. Her heart skipped. The name matched the diary's author. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. The door slammed shut behind her. Arianna tried to open it, but the knob wouldn't turn. From the corner of her eye, a chair moved. Just a few inches, but enough to be unmistakable. Then came the soft tapping. 1, 2, 3. Fingernails on the windows. But no one was outside. She whispered an apology to the room without realizing, and moments later, the door released its grip and opened. She fled without looking back. That evening, she searched the school records for Margaret Elms. Nothing came up. It was as though she had never existed. But the classroom had told her otherwise. The diary consumed Arianna's nights. She read slowly, carefully, connecting the madness within its pages to the strange happenings around her. One entry listed names, 6 girls. All students. All had reported bullying. All had vanished without trace. Police reports were inconclusive. Some files claimed they transferred. Others were simply marked, missing. Arianna dug deeper into school archives stored in the basement. Dust-covered yearbooks and old newsletters confirmed it, those girls were real. They had attended St. Elora, and all had one thing in common, they had spent time in room 303. That's when she realized the entries in the diary weren't just personal musings. They were a record. Margaret had documented each disappearance, each girl that the school chose to forget. But the way she wrote, detached, almost clinical, suggested something more terrifying. Margaret hadn't just known the victims, she had watched it happen. And then, in the back pages, the ink turned red. The lines became twisted, nonsensical, ending with a single sentence: "We only vanish when someone finally sees us." One night, just before curfew, Arianna noticed the fog had entered the building. It seeped in through window cracks and beneath doors. The corridors filled with it, thick and slow-moving. No one else seemed to notice. She followed it, heart pounding, as it led her back toward room 303. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, and the doors she passed felt unfamiliar. Her surroundings blurred. The walls now bore claw-like scratches, and whispers floated around her, disjointed and fragmented, begging, accusing, screaming. She stumbled as a hand brushed her ankle. A figure crawled out of the fog, a girl in uniform, her head bent unnaturally, hair matted with dirt and blood. Her mouth was open, but no scream escaped. Behind her, others emerged. Pale faces. Empty eyes. Their bodies twitched as if trying to move against an unseen force. Arianna turned and ran, but the hallway wouldn't end. Her breath grew ragged. She screamed, but her voice vanished in the mist. Just as her legs buckled, a cold hand grabbed hers, not to harm, but to guide. She was yanked backward through a door she hadn't seen before and landed in her dorm, gasping, as though the whole event had been a dream. Except the fog still clung to her clothes. A few days later, Arianna visited the school's forgotten art gallery, mostly abandoned works from past students. At the far end hung a portrait that made her blood run cold. It was a painting of a girl standing in fog, head slightly turned, expression unreadable. The name on the plaque, Margaret Elms, 1987. But there was something else. In the background, Arianna saw her own room. Room 303. Faint, almost hidden, as if Margaret had painted the future. As she stared longer, the fog in the painting seemed to move. Slowly, subtly. And then, Margaret's eyes shifted. Just barely. Looking directly at her. Arianna stumbled back. The gallery lights flickered. And for a split second, she saw her own reflection in the glass, her face, overlapped with Margaret's. The implication was clear. Whatever force haunted Saint Elora wasn't just tethered to Margaret. It needed a vessel. A continuation. A witness to the suffering. A chronicler of pain. And it had chosen Arianna. Back in her room, Arianna tried to breathe, to think. The diary lay open where she'd left it. But something had changed. A fresh entry was scribbled beneath Margaret's final page. The ink was still wet. It read, "The silence is over." She saw them. She wrote them. Now it's her turn. As she stared, the pages flipped on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped at a blank sheet. The pen beside her moved. No hand held it. Yet it began to write, line by line, using her own name. The lights dimmed. The whispers returned, louder this time. But they weren't begging anymore. They were welcoming. From the corner of her room, the fog thickened, and from it, a girl stepped out. Faceless. Barefoot. Wearing a torn uniform and Margaret's locket. Arianna tried to run, but her body wouldn't move. The pen scratched louder across the page. The walls pulsed with breath. And as the fog consumed her, the final words echoed through the dorm. We vanish not because we're forgotten. We vanish because someone remembered. The next morning, Arianna did not attend breakfast. Her roommate, Elise, assumed she had overslept, until she noticed the bed was untouched, the blanket still tucked, the pillow cold. Her desk, usually cluttered with books and sketches, was clean. The diary was gone. The faculty checked the cameras. They saw her return to the dorm the night before, but not a single recording showed her leaving. It was as if she had simply evaporated into the air. Her name on the dorm roster was scratched out, her student ID deactivated, and her locker empty. But those closest to her still remembered. Elise especially. Because that morning, she found a single page slipped under the dorm door. It bore Arianna's handwriting. I thought I was uncovering the mystery. But the truth is, I was feeding it. It needed someone to remember them, to feel their pain. And now, it wants to become more than a memory. That same week, maintenance was asked to seal room 303 again. But the worker assigned to the job never returned home. When security went to investigate, they found the classroom open, pristine, with sunlight flooding in as though it had never aged. No sign of struggle. But on the blackboard was a fresh message written in crimson dust. We are all in the fog now. Word spread quickly through the students, though faculty tried to suppress it. Some whispered of Arianna walking the halls at night. Not quite her walk too slow, her eyes too wide. A few claimed she stood outside their windows, watching, always in places where no one should have been able to stand. More than a haunting, it was a replacement. Elise could not let go. She began tracing the same steps Arianna once had. Reading the diary. Visiting the fog-laced halls. Investigating names long erased. The grief twisted into obsession. She started seeing patterns in the portraits. Reflections that weren't her own. Lights flickering when she passed room 12C. Arianna's voice in the static of the intercom. At first, she was terrified. Then, drawn in. And then, she found a photo, an old group picture of the school's debate team. Arianna stood in the back row, smiling. But the photo was dated 1991. 34 years ago. Elise dropped the picture. Her hands trembled. Because that was the same year the first group of disappearances began. And in the back of the room, standing behind the team, was Margaret Elms. Unaged. Smiling. Some say the fog is not weather, but memory itself, gathered from pain, drawn from the forgotten. A living archive feeding on the ones who noticed too much. St. Elora, with its pristine walls and impeccable reputation, had been its host for decades. The school began to lose more students. Always the quiet ones. The bullied. The ones who lingered too long in the wrong hallway. Their names were removed quietly. Their belongings repurposed. But for those who still remembered, whispers followed them. Shadows mimicked their steps. A cold breath at the back of their neck. And sometimes, late at night, they'd hear scratching, from inside the walls. The school held tight to its image. But deep within its bones, something grew stronger. A cycle repeating itself, evolving. It no longer needed to wait to be found. Now, it reached out. Months passed. Another girl arrived at St. Elora. Her name was May Whitaker, bright, soft-spoken, full of dreams. But different. Her body bore the quiet stiffness of someone who had survived cruelty. She didn't speak of the bullying she'd faced in her old school. But the way she looked at empty hallways, or winced at loud laughter, said enough. One day, May found a notebook inside her assigned locker. Leather-bound. Worn. Familiar, though she'd never seen it before. On the first page, a message. Welcome to St. Elora. Write what you see. And without realizing why, May picked up a pen, and began to write. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.